Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States, accompanied by Major Dennis Archer.
Sit down, everyone.
The new Debbie Stabenow district that will be coming up this year. State Senator John Cherry, Democratic leader of the State Senate. Representative Barbara Rose Collins, who wanted to be here but is still, I believe, in the hospital. Representative John Conyers, member of Michigan's 14th District. Representative John Dingle, Big John, member of Michigan's 16th District. Chairman Donald Fowler, Chairman of the Democratic National Committee. State Representative Curtis Hertel from the State House Minority Leader. Harold Ickes, White House Deputy Chief of Staff. Vinnie Johnson, the three-point land, former member of Detroit Pistons and president of Pistons Packaging, who you introduced and met with a couple of weeks ago at the White House. Dr. Curtis L. Ivory, president of Wayne County Community College, former Arkansas Director of Human Services under Governor Clinton. United States Senator Carl Levin, soon to be reelected from the state of Michigan. Representative Sandra Levin from the Michigan's 12th District. Bruce Lindsay, Assistant to the President and Deputy Counsel. Terry McAuliffe, Finance Chair, Clinton Gore 96. Wayne County Executive Edward McNamara, highest-ranking elected official from Wayne County. Walter Moore, Mayor of Pontiac. Former United States Senator Donald Regal. Marvin Rosen, Finance Chair, Democratic National Committee. The Honorable Doug Ross, former Assistant Secretary of Labor for Employment and Training during the Clinton administration, now Director of Progressive Foundation. And Doug Sosnick, White House Political Director. Mayor Woodrow Stanley, Mayor of Flint, Michigan's third largest city and home of the UAW. Representative Bart Stupak, member of Michigan's 1st District in the UP. Richard Sullivan, Finance Director, Democratic National Committee. Stephen Jokic, the President of the United Auto Workers, and was invited. I'm not sure if he was able to make it. I hope that he's here. The former mayor of the city of Detroit, Coleman A. Young, and from our city council, Councilwoman Kay Everett, Councilman Gil Hill, Councilwoman Mary Ann Mahaffey, Councilman Nick Hood, and Councilwoman Sheila Cockrell. Can you give them all a big hand, please? Let me thank the Presidential Luncheon Leadership Council. Steve Jokic, you met earlier, Bernard Brochard, who's the chairman, the Honorable John Dingell again, David Hermelin, the Honorable Edward McNamara, Faylene and Honorable Larry Owen, Frank Vellacosa, and again, Steve Jokic. Now, the people here today, Mr. President, enthusiastically support you for a very simple reason, because you care about and you support us. Your support of Detroit, Mr. President, through your commitment to a real urban agenda, an agenda that boldly departs from the past trickle-down theories which were long on rhetoric but delivered only inequity and despair, is well known to this gathering of friends here today. Detroit has seen firsthand how a Clinton agenda provides the kind of strong leadership that delivers new prosperity and economic revitalization to all of our nation's cities. We have seen how your empowerment zone enabled to Detroit to turn a $100 million award into a $2 billion economic investment in an 18.35 square mile area of Detroit. Your willingness to support cities has made it easier for a mayor like me and like Woodrow Stanley and Walter Moore and many of us who are here, Mayor Prebrey from Taylor, along with other public and private leaders, to achieve a new bold success. If I could just on a personal nature, Mr. President, since I've got the mic, if you don't mind, we got an election on March 19th. We need a new stadium downtown. Remember, A is awful, B is best. Detroit is on the threshold of an exciting new future. And in the weeks and months ahead, we will have several exciting new announcements which will help confirm our future. One, next week, we hope to have the Labor Secretary, Reich, and HUD Deputy Secretary Andrew Cuomo to join us in a kickoff of a powerful new initiative called Detroit Works. It's a $100 million new program, one in which I will not go into here, but it will involve greater job opportunities for our city residents, and it will be a tremendous help to minority contractors. It's a part of the America Works partnership. It will involve the carpenters, the painters, along with the tremendous support from other building trade unions. And there has a potential in Detroit to be a national program. And I know, Mr. President, this is something that you've been pushing for, and I'm delighted that they're going to be able to kick this off here. So if you don't mind me, I'd like to ask Ed Gorman, Kenny Stewart, and Bob Kennedy to stand up, along with the other building trades folks, to say thank you for the announcement that's coming out that the President's going to get credit for next week, but the press is here, so I don't want to go into detail. Would you all please stand, please? Thank you very much. Mr. President, in your State of the Union message, you said, we have to work together if we want America to work. Well, Detroit Works is a powerful evidence that we're working together to provide more jobs for Detroit, and we're working at all levels. Detroit and southeastern Michigan are on the move because people from government, the unions, the corporate and business sector, and community leaders know the importance of working together, and it takes all of us to move forward. I am particularly proud that one of my governmental partners is County Executive Edward McNamara. Ed has been a strong and dynamic advocate for Detroit and Wayne County his entire adult life. His work as mayor of Livonia and county executive of Wayne County has enabled our area to grow and to diversify in the face of a changing economy and a changing urban area. I know Detroit has a real partner in Ed McNamara, and that you, Mr. President, have a great and loyal Democrat in Ed McNamara. It is my distinct pleasure, ladies and gentlemen, to again welcome to you to Detroit, Mr. President, and to present to you Wayne County Executive Ed McNamara.
I was offered $4,000 for my seat, but I turned it down because I needed to do a little lobbying about an airport that we're trying to do something about. And any of you that have flown in and out of that airport know that it's very, very busy. It's a tremendous generator of economics, and it's going to be one of the greatest job generators in this state over the next 5 years. That was an unpaid political announcement. You know, 4 years ago, we met a gentleman with great credentials, but no track record. He carried the state of Michigan, first Democrat in many, many years. In this year, this gentleman is back, and he's now added a great track record. And you know, one of the greatest mysteries of the universe to me is that the press, and I include the local Detroit press, continuing to claim that the economy of the country is great in spite of Bill Clinton, but the economy of the state of Michigan is great because of John Engler? Before Newt Gingrich, I can't even pronounce this guy. Well, the minority whip now is David Bonnier, and he is the right man for it. For the past year, Congressman David Bonnier has been the conscience that Newt Gingrich doesn't want to hear. He has been an honest voice that won't let Congress forget that real people depend on him. Even before his current job made him a regular on nightly news, Dave Bonnier was one of Michigan's most notable Democrats. He has represented the interest of Macomb County and St. Clair County for almost 20 years. Even when Macomb County swung over to Ronald Reagan, they kept sending David Bonnier back because they know a good congressman when they see one. Ladies and gentlemen,
the more I'm reminded why America needs the Democratic Party. Now, it is indeed quite a field that they have assembled, the Republicans. Steve Forbes, Pat Buchanan, Bob Dole, and Lamar Alexander. Flat tax, flat earth, falling flat and flattened. Now, the field is so bad that I had a dream the other night that Newt Gingrich got back into the race. And he was flying. Pat Buchanan goes to his room. He opens this door, and there's this angry bear. And a voice booms out, "Pat Buchanan, you have sinned. You shall spend the rest in there and do it together. We will be successful." Those candidates can go after him all they want, because when the crowd gathers on the Capitol steps next January, and when that Bible is held aloft and that hand is put up in the air, it's going to... The reason we are surging today as a party, is because our message is more, and it's more rooted in the idea that, as I said, we are all in this together. Nobody has done a better job of articulating that message through his career, and especially the last 15 months, than our friend John Dingell. Just think about the issues that are at the forefront of this debate today. Jobs, income, Medicare, Medicaid, John Dingell.
Thank you, my friend David Bonnier. No one in the delegation and no one in the Congress has served Michigan, or indeed the nation, better than has my friend David Bonnier, who has shown extraordinary courage, dignity, decency, and persistence in seeing to it that the message of the Democrats gets out and that the people understand some of the wrong things that are going on in Washington, especially inside the Congress under the leadership of Newt Gingrich. Like all of you, I'm delighted to be here to welcome a great president of the United States. And Debbie and I are very proud of the things that he is doing in terms of preserving traditional American values and family values. And we're proud of what he's doing in terms of making this country better and speaking a message of hope, which is really important. I am particularly pleased to have now the opportunity of not only telling you that you are served by one of the great delegations in the Congress. And I won't name them, but they're here and they serve you well. And I beg you be proud of what they do on your behalf. But to introduce one who has brought great inspiration, dignity, and leadership to this delegation. His suits are a little rumpled. Sometimes he moves in what appear to be peculiar directions, but there's one thing about him that's always very plain. After you look to see what it is he does and what he has done, you're satisfied that he's done the right thing for exactly the right reason. I'm proud of the way that he has worked with the delegation. I'm proud of how he has served Michigan. I'm proud of his work on behalf of Michigan industry and Michigan workmen. I'm delighted to see the work that he does continuously on trade, to see to it that trade is not only free but fair. And I rejoice of his concerns for integrity in government and for decency on the part of government. And I like to hear someone in Washington enunciate, along with Bill Clinton, the message of hope, of growth, that the country can be better, it will be better, that all we have to do is to work together to make it so. He is a great senator. He is our senior senator. He has served us well, and I'm sure that you, as I am, and Debbie is, are proud of our senior senator, Carl Levin. Carl, we are honored that you're with us today.
John, thank you for the magnificent introduction. The rumpled suit, I understand that the peculiar directions, though, I want to talk to you about later. Mr. President, it is an honor to stand with the people of Michigan before you today and to tell you that we here in Michigan are going to carry Michigan this fall for Clinton Gore. President Clinton has spent his tremendous energies on things that matter to average citizens. On job creation in the private sector, where the creation of jobs has gone on at a pace 7 times greater than that of his predecessor. He is focused on job security, on keeping jobs in America and increasing important and well-paying jobs here, particularly in the manufacturing sector, where we've seen a turnaround under President Clinton's leadership. He is focused on health care security so that people who have health insurance will not lose it if they lose their job, and that people without health insurance will finally be guaranteed that right in this country, as is guaranteed in every industrialized country in the world. He is focused on getting 100,000 new police on our streets, and he's focused on getting assault weapons off of our streets. He is focused on education programs at a time when those, particularly under Newt Gingrich's leadership in the House, would cut education by $3 billion on vital programs from Head Start to college loan programs. Our president has focused on investing more in education, not less. He has innovated a national service program where tens of thousands of young people can pay for their education, can work for their education. And at the same time that he's done all of that, he has implemented a deficit reduction program which has actually reduced the annual deficit in this country by 1/2 in the last 3 years. And he did that, by the way, with the Democrats in the Congress, without one Republican vote in the United States Congress. He has reduced the size of our federal bureaucracy by 200,000 people so that he not only talks about government being leaner and stronger, at the same time he has done something about it. As important as all of those achievements, however, as important as all of them, at a time when others run for president, who are willing to divide Americans for political gain, using issues as wedges that would separate Americans into isolated camps. President Clinton believes in and fights for the ideal that we are one people. That ideal has inspired him as a young man to choose the path of public service. It is that ideal that gave him the determination that it took to follow that path from Hope, Arkansas, all the way to the Oval Office. He never fails to remind us that our greatness as a nation stems from our underlying unity, and that there is nothing that we can't accomplish if we join together to carve out a common destiny in a world of challenge and change. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a matter of real personal privilege and pride that I, along with you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Senator Levin, for that kind introduction and for your service in the Senate. I'm depending on all of you to make sure he continues that service in the Senate. We need him. When you remember in 1996 what the other party attempted to do in 1995 to our budget and to our country, remember that the president alone could not stop it. If we had not had a veto-proof Senate and House, it would not have been possible to stop. So I ask you to re-elect Carl Levin and John Dingell and David Bonnier and all the other members of the Democratic Caucus of Michigan who are here. I see Sandy Levin and I think John Conyers is here. I see Bart Stupak out there, and I'm sure Lynn Rivers is here, and we need more people. So I want you to work hard in these races because they matter. They matter to you. They matter to our country. It was a pretty long, lonely, cold fight for the last year until the American people began to be heard loud and clear to make it possible for us to do some positive things, which I hope will come forward in 1996. But I'm telling you, it really matters, not only to Michigan, but to the entire United States, for these people to be reelected and for you to send others of goodwill to join them. So I thank you, Senator, and I thank you, David, for your leadership. And I want to say a special word of thanks to John Dingell. You know, when the Democrats lost the House for the first time in a long time, a lot of members announced their retirement. And it wasn't so much fun anymore if you were a committee chairman or you had a nice subcommittee. And one day, Hillary and I were sitting alone in the White House talking. This is a true story. We were talking. And some senior member of the House had announced his retirement. And I looked at her and I said, you know what? I'll bet you $100 John Dingell won't quit. He doesn't think you should quit when you're down. You ought to keep fighting until you get up again. Then you can quit. And I thank you for that. Thank you, Ed McNamara, for that subtle reference to the airport and the funds you want. We were sitting there, you know, and Ed in his nice Irish charm said, you remember when you started running for president and nobody knew who you were, but I was there for you? I said, yeah. He said, didn't you remember when everybody said you were just dead as a doornail, you were dropping like a rock, and I didn't quit you? I said, yeah. He said, then I've always been there, haven't I? I said, yeah, well, he said, the bills come due. I don't want anything for myself, but my airport needs $15 million a year for the next 10 years. If every public official asked for the bill to come due only for the public interest, this country would be a better place. Thank you, Mr. McNamara. Thank you. I want to say it's nice to see Ambassador Blanchard here. I had occasion last week to talk to the Prime Minister of Canada, who is a remarkable man, and he was helping us to maintain our mission of peace and freedom and democracy in Haiti. And just in passing, he said, you know, you need to know that Jim Blanchard is the best ambassador to Canada in my lifetime. He has done a remarkable job. No, thank you. Thank you. I want to thank all the former members of Congress who are here, the leaders of labor, the leaders of the teachers' organizations, the business leaders, and all others who've come here for the Democratic Party today. I want to thank all these folks here at our tables who helped to sponsor this event for the work that they did. And I want to say a special word of thanks to Mayor Archer for proving that the empowerment zone could work, because Detroit has set the standard for the rest of the country. The other day we had a meeting in Washington of all the communities who had participated in our Empowerment Zone Enterprise Community Initiative. And for a modest investment of cash and a modest cluster of tax incentives, it is remarkable what is going on. But in no community in America can it be said that Detroit has been matched by taking this roughly $100 million in cash and about that much, perhaps a little more in tax incentives, and turning it into a $2 billion private commitment. I thank all the business community who participated in that, and the fact that everybody's working together here. But Mayor, more than anything else, it's a tribute to your leadership, and I thank you for what you have done. I also want to thank the mayor for introducing everybody. He did a good job of introducing everybody. It reminded me of, he kept on introducing people. You know, it reminded me of the very first speech I ever gave as an elected official was when I became Attorney General of my state almost 20 years ago. And I was very nervous. And there were 500 people at a Rotary Club installation banquet in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. I never will forget this. January 1977. Banquet started at 6:30. I got up at 9:45 to talk. There were 500 people there, and everybody had been introduced in the entire audience except 3 people, and they went home mad. And the guy that got up to introduce me looked out at the crowd and said, "You know, we could have stopped here and had a real nice evening." And I thought, now that's not what he meant, but that's what he said. Ever since then, I've been more careful about what I said. I also want to thank David Bonnier for telling that joke. I used to tell jokes, but they told me it wasn't presidential, so I had to quit. So now I just have to laugh at other people. I'm always grateful when I get one. Let me say a special word of thanks to the DNC chairman, Don Fowler, who's here with us, and to Terry McAuliffe and Laura Hardigan for the work they've done. I'm very grateful to them. And let me say to all of you, again, I don't want to give a long talk today, but I want you to understand exactly what is at stake. In 1992, when I ran for president and the people of Michigan were good enough to vote for me, the real issue was whether we had to have a change or stay with the status quo, whether we would adopt an aggressive approach to the challenges facing America, the economic challenges and the social challenges, or whether we would basically say that the government could kind of stand pat and wait for things to get better. And so the American people, both those who voted for my candidacy and those who supported Mr. Perot, voted for change. In 1996, there is a different issue. It may be papered over from time to time, and people may claim they're more moderate or whatever you will hear, but the truth is that the choice will be between 2 very different changes, 2 very different approaches to the future. And you will have to decide, along with all our fellow Americans, which approach you favor. At least now, as I think the mayor said, or the senator said, somebody said, you have some basis for comparison that goes beyond rhetoric. When I became president, I was basically driven into the race by the conviction that this country could not sit by and permit the American dream to be squandered for a generation of Americans, permit the leadership of 50 years to be squandered for the future of America, and permit this country to be divided and to come apart when we ought to be coming together. I had a very simple, straightforward vision for the country that I still think about every single day. I believe we have to go into the next century with the American dream alive and well for every person who's willing to work for it, with America, the world's leading force for peace and freedom and prosperity and security, and with America coming together around our basic values of work and faith and family, of responsibility along with opportunity, and more important than anything else, of a sense of community, that we are going forward together if we're going forward at all, and that we don't need to become a place and not a country. We don't need to become a swarm of isolated individuals. We don't need to become a group of people who think that we can only advance if our neighbors fall back, who think that we can only be important if we can somehow diminish the significance of others who share this land with us. The ultimate, terrible, extreme tragedy of that point of view we saw once again in the Middle East today, where a fanatic blew himself to smithereens for the pleasure of killing innocent children. Why? Because if you believe those who are different from you are the embodiment of the devil, then they deserve whatever they get. And then life's animating purpose is continuing the division, turning up the heat until it becomes hatred, and making sure that nothing good or positive ever happens. And in a fundamental way, when you go through a period of change like we are, thank God we don't face that in that dimension. But when you go through a period of change like we are, when it can be very disorienting, you have to decide, am I going to define myself in terms of who I am or who I'm not? In terms of what I'm for or what I am against? In terms of what I intend to do or in terms of what I want someone to do for me? These are great and fundamental questions. Now, there has always been a healthy political debate in this country, and there always will be, and well, there should be. No one has a corner on the truth. No one has a market for the future. I understand that. But when we decide what kind of change we want, it depends fundamentally, more important than anything else, on whether we believe we have to go forward together or whether we think we ought to be left to fend for ourselves because all of us in this room are more successful than most, so we'll do just fine. That is the fundamental change question the American people confront today. If you look at this period through which we are going, it explains much of the ambivalence, sometimes the outright confusion people have about the present moment. How could we have almost 8 million new jobs after 4 years of having virtually no new jobs? How can we have a growth in manufacturing jobs after 4 years of losing manufacturing jobs? How could we regain the lead in automobile production for the first time in a decade and a half? How could we be voted the world's most productive economy 2 years in a row after having been ranked 5th or 6th or something when I took office? How could all this happen and still half or more of the American people are working harder for the same or lower pay in terms of purchasing power? How could that happen? How could it be that we created this many jobs, but there would still be isolated pockets where no new opportunities were coming and children were on the street raising themselves, and therefore the crime rate would be going down nationwide, but it'd still be going up among juveniles in certain areas? How could this happen? How can it be if the stock market's at 5,700, big companies are laying people off and downsizing them, and people my age, 50-year-old men, are being told that they're not important anymore? Thank you very much for the last 25 years. You figure out how to send your kids to college. How do all these things happen at once? How could we have 3 years in a row where we have more new businesses started than ever before, and 3 years in a row where we have more new self-made millionaires, a great thing, not somebody being given an inheritance, making $1 million in worth for themselves in this system? How could that happen at the same time these other things are happening? How could all the news be overall so good and then there be these specific stories of people riddled with anxiety? The answer is it always happens when you totally change the rules in a society. And when a period of profound change comes along. And the reason a lot of us can't understand it is that nobody here old enough to remember the last time it happened, because the last time it happened was 100 years ago. But you think about what built Michigan. 100 years ago, people started moving from the rural areas to cities and towns. 100 years ago, people stopped having most of their work being on the farm to most of their work being in the factory or in shops serving the factory or serving people who made their living in a factory. And it changed everything. And then after the Depression, there was this great explosion of people out of places where they made their living on the farm, running to places like Detroit and Flint and the suburbs to make a living in the factory. I mean, I'm convinced that one of the reasons I won the Michigan Democratic primary is that every third voter had a grandmother from Arkansas. I mean, why? Because this great exodus that started 100 years ago continued right through until after the Great Depression, into World War II, and after World War II. This sea change, farm to factory, country to city and town. What is the comparable change today? From industry to information and technology, from an American market to a global market for goods, for services, and for money. Changing the nature of work. There's more mind and less muscle, even in the factory. It's amazing how many factories you go into today and watch either work being done by robots or workers working on computers calculating what the machine should do with ever greater precision. And the change in the workplace. We all know about all these people being downsized, but what we never hear, because it's happening in a little place, is in 1,000 little places, is that in the last 3 years, there were more new jobs created by businesses owned by women alone than were laid off by the Fortune 500. So there's a change in the workplace. The workplace is becoming more numerous and smaller by and large. And when all that happens, you have all these new possibilities created, but when you disrupt the established order of things, a lot of people who have worked hard, done everything they should do all their lives, find themselves on the short end of the stick. So the challenge for us today, and the challenge America faces, is how do we keep the dynamism going? You know, we've actually gotten a modest increase in wages in the last 3 years for the first time in a decade. How do we keep the jobs coming? How do we keep the new businesses being formed? How do we keep the kind of empowerment efforts we see in Detroit going? How do we keep the good things about the economy and still give more and more people their shot at the American dream so that we can say, if you work hard, if you play by the rules, you've got a chance to live up to your God-given potential? That is the challenge. And I argue to you that the way we do it is not by turning around and going back, because that's denial and we can't get there. As all the kids in my daughter's class say, denial is not just a river in Egypt. We can't, that is not an option. We have to work all the way through this. But if we're going to do it, we have to do it together. We cannot proceed in a country where people believe they're not going to be treated fairly, that no matter how hard they work, they'll never get ahead, that no matter what they do, they'll never have their shot at the American dream. Now, that's the point I was trying to make in the State of the Union. When I said, and I believe, that we have to have a program to meet the challenges of the future that focus on what we can do together to make our families stronger, to make our streets safer, to make our environment cleaner, to continue our leadership for peace and freedom and prosperity. What we can do together to have a government that is smaller and costs less but does more. Not a weak government, but one that's effective in being a partner with the American people. And in terms of reviving the hopes of all Americans, what we can do together to guarantee a world-class educational opportunity to every single American, starting with our children in Head Start and going through every single adult worker for a lifetime. And what we can do together to create an environment in which people can find a measure of economic security for home and family while we keep the dynamic economy going. Those are the challenges. And I believe we have to do it together. I believe this idea that we can go back to the era when everybody was left to fend for themselves, that we can say the government's intrinsically evil and everything it does is wrong and they mess up a one-car parade, is foolish at best. Let me tell you something. My friend James Carville has just written a book, which I commend to all of you. It's a little paperback book, but in it he points out that in the last 30 years we have spent 1/2 of your tax money on 3 things: defense, Social Security, and Medicare. Now, did you get your money's worth? We won the Cold War. We cut the rate of poverty among elderly Americans in half. And with Medicare, if you live to be 65, you are in the group of seniors with the highest life expectancy in any country in the entire world. I think we got our money's worth by working together, and we will in the future as well. So as we go back to Washington today, I want to challenge the Congress to continue to work to keep the dynamism of the economy going, but give people a greater sense of security and a greater sense of opportunity. And there are lots of things we can do. We ought to pass a balanced budget plan consistent with the values we've been fighting for the last 15 months. We can get lower interest rates, which means lower rates to borrow money for businesses to put people to work. It means lower home mortgage rates, lower car payment rates, lower credit card rates, but we ought to do it without undermining our commitments through Medicare, through Medicaid, through education, through environmental protection. We do not need to do what some of the extremists urged us to do last year, which is to make money by raising taxes on the hardest pressed working families and giving people the right to raid their employees' pension funds. We do not have to do that to balance the budget. We ought to do it in the right way. We have a tax cut. It ought to be targeted to families raising children to give them a chance to participate in the American dream. And the most important tax cut we could give is a tax deduction for the cost of college education. That is the most important thing we could do. We ought to pass welfare reform that is very tough in terms of requiring people to move to work, but understands that people have to succeed at home and at work. So we shouldn't punish innocent children. We should lift up children and strengthen families even as we have the right kind of welfare reform. And I cannot believe that there's even a debate in Washington about whether we ought to raise the minimum wage. You know, we're having a nice time here today. And I've heard every time somebody says we ought to raise the minimum wage, they say, oh, that's just going to cost a lot of jobs. It's interesting that the last time the Congress voted to raise the minimum wage, most of the people in the other party were for it, maybe because they had a president of the other party in the White House. But the people out there working on the minimum wage don't much care who's in the White House. It's all they can do to keep body and soul together and pay the bills. There are millions of people out there today working 40 hours a week, raising their kids on $4.25 an hour. Now, you want the mayor to go into inner city Detroit and tell these kids they ought to stay off drugs and stay out of gangs and work hard, and they'll amount to something in life, and they can have a good life? And oh, by the way, here's $4.25 an hour, raise 3 kids on it? This is wrong. The minimum wage will be at a 40-year low in terms of what it'll buy if we don't raise it by the end of the year. We do not have to grow the American economy by keeping the minimum wage as low as possible. And I have just reviewed the last 15 studies on this, and all but 2 say that there is no significant loss of jobs with a modest raise in the minimum wage. Indeed, it may increase jobs because you'll have more people wanting to move from welfare to work if you pay them a living wage. We ought to raise the minimum wage. We ought to do it this year. We ought not have to wait till the election. We ought to have another round of empowerment zones. There ought to be another 100 communities that become empowerment zones or enterprise communities that have a chance to do what Detroit did. There are other cities in Michigan that need a chance to do this as well. We ought to pass the bill that has now been voted out of the committee, and the Senate unanimously has 50 Republican and Democratic co-sponsors. Nearly simple little bill. It says you shouldn't lose your health insurance when you change job or when someone in your family gets sick. Surely, if we believe in work and family, we can say that you shouldn't lose your health insurance when you change jobs or when someone in your family gets sick. We ought to pass that bill right away. And finally, let me say we should pass the education appropriations that is now months and months late. We ought to fund the programs for high standards in our schools. We ought to fund the programs that will help us to bring high technology into our poor schools. We ought to fund the programs that will help our schools be safer and more drug-free. And let me just give you one example. I was in a school in New Jersey about 2 weeks ago. in a neighborhood that is very modest income, where a significant percentage of the children are first-generation immigrants, where the test scores were so low and the performance was so bad that the state was about to go in and take over the schools. And Bell Atlantic came in with others in the community and put computers in all the classes, made sure they had good educational software, and then they put computers in the homes. I met a man who came here from El Salvador in 1980 who is now, he and his wife email the principal at school to find out whether their kid's doing the homework and how they're doing. And let me tell you what's happened since they did that in that poor school in New Jersey. I believe is the second or third richest state in America. That school district in that poor neighborhood now has a higher attendance rate, a higher graduation rate, and most important, higher test scores than the New Jersey state average, because they were given a chance to be a part of something good and noble. That's what we ought to do for everybody. Now, that's what I stand for. If we had no government, there would be a lot of good things happening in America. You can see it in some of these countries that we compete with that change governments 2 or 3 times a year just to kind of stay in practice. And their economies continue to grow, but their unemployment rates are higher. They suffer terrible inequalities of opportunity. You just have to decide. It's your country, it's your future. And I'm telling you, if we can get our people that agree with us to break through their skepticism and break through their cynicism and break through all the political rhetoric that dominates too many of our elections and show up, stand up, and be counted this year, I know what decision America will make. I do not believe the American people want to continue to go down a road where we are divided for cheap, short-term political purposes at every election. I think the American people understand that when we are divided, we defeat ourselves, and when we are united, we never lose. So I ask you, in Michigan, where we have to win to move the country forward, stand up with us and fight with us and re-elect these members of Congress and elect some more and help us so that we can make the right decision. The issue is no longer change versus status quo. There are 2 dramatically different views of change on the agenda for America, and one of them has us going forward together. That's the right one. That's the one we need to bring to the American people. Thank you, and God bless you all.